Hi everybody, it's Mark Vogt, Pond Outfitters for fly fishing and archery hunting at large here in North Aurora, Illinois. Taking a cool November morning to teach you a little bit about what I consider a hybrid string walking method that works quite well. We're going to be using a standard recurve bow, standard finger tabs, standard arrow, only a shelf. There's no peep sight on the rear, there's no sights of any kind. The technique that I'm going to show you, string walking, has been around for a while. It involves changing the gap between the top of your finger and the arrow itself depending on the distance to the target. The idea is that the larger the gap, the shorter the distance, which means there's a limit to this technique, that eventually at the longest distance your finger ends up either right underneath the arrow or one finger over. What I do that's different is, instead of actually anchoring off to the side and having to look down the side of the arrow like this all the time at my target, that additional parallax ends up throwing your whole sight process off. Instead, what I've actually done is adapt the recurve archery technique, which is where you actually anchor directly underneath your chin and look down the left side of your string. You look right over the top. In this case, I'll look right at the tip of the arrow. So if you, my camera, were actually my 30-yard target, I would be making a gap. I would be making a gap of about 2.5 fingers in width, shifting my fingers down. Then I'll still anchor my fingers directly underneath my chin, and I'll put the tip of the arrow right smack on the center of the target. Just like that. Here's what it looks like. The target that you see out there, that should be 20 yards, that should be 30 yards. So on a 20-yard target, actually I misspoke earlier, the 20-yard target, it's going to be about 2.5 finger widths. I'm going to aim, pull to the back of my chin, bumped it a little bit. Okay. 2.5 fingers. Draw it to under my chin. Line up. Tip of the arrow right in the center of the target. That's a pretty good shot, considering I did nothing to test for it. Now we have 30 yards out there. I'm going to knock the arrow in the exact same position, but I'm going to choose a different gap. 30 yards instead of 2.5. It's probably going to be about 2 fingers, maybe 2.25 or 1 3/4. I'm going to slide down. There's my gap for 30 yards. Exact same technique. Draw underneath my chin, put the tip of the arrow right smack on the center of the target. Actually a little high. And I gotta adjust this camera. Let's do it one more time. I'm liking these new arrows because it turns out they're so light, my gaps are bigger. I get bigger range. So for a 30-yard target, it's going to actually be 2 full fingers instead of 2.5. Same technique. Somewhere between 2 and 1 3/4 is going to be my gap for 30 yards. Although I'm going to take one more 2-finger shot. It is cold, my fingers are cold, there's frost on the ground. So here's my 2 fingers again. I'm going to try to let you look right over my shoulder. I'd say that's a pretty good distance. And what you get out of this technique, this hybrid technique from Pond Scum, is that by drawing straight underneath your chin and looking down the sight, looking down the side of the string and looking right at the top of the tip of the arrow, you take out any left or right play at all. Distance doesn't matter. You're not going to be tipping the arrow a little bit for 20, a little bit more for 30, a little bit more for 40, a little bit more for 50. It's all gone by using this anchoring technique, the recurve archery, Olympic archery technique, along with the string walking. What you've effectively done is this. Where most compound bows have a front sight with a number of different pins, but a single rear sight, what they're doing to change the elevation of the arrow is change the elevation of the bow by lifting the front up. The relative position of the rear stays the same, but you're going to change it. You're going to change it. If this is your 20-yard position, then this is your 30, this is your 40, this is your 50, this is your 60, something like that. With my technique, you're actually pretty much keeping the front of the bow right where it is, and instead you're changing the gap here and you're tipping the arrow this way. So this is your 20-yard position, this is your 30-yard position, this is your 40-yard position, this is your 50-yard position, this is your 60, 70, and 80-yard position. And in case you're curious, yeah, 80 yards is possible with this technique. Let's shoot at the 50-yard target that's out there. Let me turn the camera a little bit. And now that bag should be 50 yards. My 50 yard would be right at the top of my a zero gap, right at the top of my arrow. So I'm going to use the exact same technique. Draw all the way back onto my chin. Put the tip of the arrow in the center of the target. Actually, my new arrows, I actually have more distance than 50 yards. This is fantastic. We're going to change the gap. We're going to try a half finger gap at that distance. Now I got a half finger gap. We're going to try it one more time at 50 yards. Draw back under my chin, look down the left side of my string, put the tip of the arrow on the center of the target. Did you see where that was? That's in the yellow at about 10 o'clock on a first shot with a freezing cold hand in this kind of weather. Let's go take a look at where those shots ended up. I'm going to pop this camera out of the tripod and go take a peek. So on freezing cold weather, you can see the frost on the ground here. There's the first shot at 20 yards, and there's the 20-yard plaque is right down there. So the technique was solid for 20 yards because I'm just getting used to these arrows. Here it is at 30 yards. I end up with one kill shot, one near kill shot, and I've got one arrow that flies a little high. That was at 30 yards, and now when we go all the way out here to 40 and then to 50, you can see that if you warm up this a little bit, there's a 50-yard shot with string walking. There's a lot of people who would call that a kill shot. You may not get the heart of the deer, but you would have picked him off in the lung, something like that. So what am I saying? I'm saying that hybrid technique, the Ponscom hybrid string walking technique, can be taught in the time it takes you to watch this one video. But what it's going to give you, depending on the weight of your arrows, it's going to give you a range on your string walking anywhere from 30 all the way up to 60 meters in this case. And if you use light arrows, these are my hunting arrows. So 125 grain heads, 32-inch uncut, triple fletched with five feathers sides. These are not light arrows. So if I'm already taking a 52-pound bow and I'm casting these particular arrows with string walking all the way out to what looks like it's going to be even 55 meters, I won't say 60, but if I go one finger over on my string, then I'll get another 10 yards. So I'll be able to get 55 and I would be able to get 70, but I wouldn't be able to do anything in between 50 and 75 yards because I wouldn't be able to put the tip of the arrow right on the target. I'd have to aim a little high or aim a little low, something like that. But you see that the technique is sound. You can walk in the woods, a traditional hunter, not with a compound bow or this namby-pamby stuff that's a PlayStation with all the cheat codes. It can be just you, the arrow, the bow, and your grip, your finger tab, and you can actually pick a deer off at 40, 45, and 50 yards with string walking techniques. It can be done. Try the Ponscom method. Tell me what you think. The method does work. When I'm using target arrows, the super light, skinny little ones, I'm all the way out there at the 90-meter mark, and I won't brag enough and say that I'm always in the yellow at 90 meters. Nobody is, but I'm always in the red at 90 meters out there with the target arrows. The technique really does work. This is Mark Vogt, Ponscom, fly fitters and outfitters at large, hoping you guys that have always been interested in string walking actually decide to give it a try. Thanks, bye.